In a world obsessed with beauty, what if you never had to lose it? Dorian Gray was perfection, a model, an icon, a face the world worshipped. But when an artist captured more than just his image, when a portrait began to change, in his place something unnatural was born. As the man stayed young, the portrait grew monstrous. And soon, the line between mirror and man shattered. This isn't just a story about vanity. It's about what we become when we trade our soul for a perfect face. The soft hum of monitors filled the loft, echoing beneath high ceilings and concrete walls bathed in golden morning light. Basil Hallward sat hunched over his digital tablet, stylus dancing with precision, each stroke breathing life into the image on the screen. The portrait was nearly complete, his most captivating work yet. And it wasn't just because of his talent. It was him, Dorian Gray. Basil glanced up from his screen and looked across the room, where Dorian sat lounging on a velvet couch near the window, sipping an iced matcha and lazily scrolling through his phone. The glow of the morning sun caught his cheekbones just right, skin smooth, flawless, untouched by stress or time. He was the type of beautiful people couldn't help but stare at, the kind that made you believe perfection was possible. But it wasn't just his looks. It was the aura, carefree, magnetic, just a little untouchable. Basil's fingers trembled slightly as he turned back to the screen. He didn't want to admit it out loud, but the painting wasn't just his best, it was his most personal. Every brushstroke was a secret. Every layer, a confession. "You really think this'll go viral?" Dorian asked, eyes still on his phone. His voice was smooth, casual-like. He hadn't just asked a question Basil had been agonizing over for weeks. "It's not for that," Basil replied quietly. "It's for me. You inspired it." Dorian looked up, one brow raised. "Right, but if it's good, and it is good, don't you want it seen? That's the whole point of art these days, isn't it? Reach, exposure, followers." Basil hesitated. "Not everything has to be shared." Dorian smirked and got up, walking over to stand behind Basil. He stared at the glowing screen, studying the image of himself captured in still perfection. "God," he muttered, "it's kind of insane seeing myself like this. I look untouchable." "You are," Basil whispered. Just then, the elevator doors clanged open at the far end of the loft. In walked Lord Henry Wottenthal, sharp-suited and unmistakably bored with the world. He carried the scent of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke, even though he vaped now. Not that it mattered. Everything about him said dangerous charm. He was older than Dorian and Basil, but age seemed to add to his appeal. "Hope I'm not interrupting a lover's quarrel," he said with a lazy grin, tossing his coat onto a chair without asking. "We're not," Basil started, but Harry had already turned his attention to the portrait. Well, if it isn't the golden boy himself. Christ, Basil, that's brilliant. It's like he's glowing." "He always is," Basil muttered. Lord Henry leaned in, eyes twinkling. "Dorian, my boy, what do you think of immortality?" Dorian blinked. "What?" "Immortality. Staying young. Staying this beautiful. Forever." Dorian chuckled. "I mean, who wouldn't want that?" "Exactly. You know, the Greeks used to think beauty was a sign of favor from the gods. Now it just means you're born with good genes and know how to work your angles. But what if you could stop time?" Lord Henry's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Stay exactly as you are. While the world ages, you don't." Dorian looked back at the portrait. Something flickered in his eyes, curiosity, maybe, or hunger. "People don't want real anymore," Harry went on. "They want the illusion of it. Filtered reality, controlled perception. That's power, Dorian. Real power." "I'd sell my soul for that," Dorian said, half joking. The silence that followed was thick. Basil turned away, suddenly cold. Lord Henry smiled like he'd heard exactly what he wanted. The rooftop bar at the Avalon Hotel pulsed with energy. The city lights below flickered like dying stars, muted by the heavy bass line of synth pop and the clinking of crystal cocktail glasses. Dorian leaned against the railing, dressed in an all-black outfit that shimmered faintly under the LEDs. drawing eyes without even trying. Lord Henry lounged beside him, a lowball glass of whiskey in hand, swirling the amber liquid like it held secrets. Across from them, a group of fashion influencers and tech investors laughed too loudly, all carefully curated for the camera lenses capturing the night. "You do realize," Henry said without looking at Dorian, "this life you're building, it's not about who you are. It's about who they think you are. A mirage." "The man in the portrait." Dorian glanced over. "And what's wrong with that? Nothing if you can control it. But eventually people expect more. They want access, authenticity, drama, until you burn out or disappear. But you, Dorian, you're different. You have something they can't fake, which is, you don't try to be perfect. You just are. And I know men who would sacrifice everything for what you have. Fame, power, youth." Dorian sipped his drink, eyes distant. The words sounded flattering, but they felt like a challenge, or a prophecy. He'd been thinking about that portrait all day. It was still on Basil's private server, untouched by social media. The temptation to post it was enormous. It was art. It was truth. But more than that, it was him, frozen in that flawless moment. The idea of change, of aging, of losing what made him Dorian Gray, that gnawed at something primal inside him. "What if I really meant what I said?" Dorian asked suddenly. "About trading my soul?" Henry laughed softly. "Nobody ever means it. Not until it's too late." "But what if I did? What if the portrait aged instead of me? What if I could stay like this forever?" Henry gave him a long look. "Then you'd win the game everyone else is dying to play. You'd be untouchable. But be careful what you wish for, Dorian. The cost of eternity is usually your humanity." Dorian didn't respond. His gaze drifted to his reflection in the glass of the railiness. Symmetrical face, bright eyes, that sculpted illusion of invincibility. Later that night, in Basil's loft, Dorian returned alone. He stood in front of the digital screen displaying the portrait. It was still open, glowing in the dim room like a relic from another world. He touched the edge of the frame and whispered something he didn't even mean to say. "I give it everything. Take what you want, just let me stay like this." A flicker. The screen distorted for half a second, barely noticeable, but enough to make him blink. The portrait remained the same, but something in the air had changed. The silence felt deeper. He stepped back, uneasy. He told himself it was nothing, just late-night drama and too much whiskey. But when he turned away and walked to the elevator, the screen behind him shimmered just slightly, and in the painting, the eyes of the portrait followed him. Morning arrived like a slap-right, noisy and uninvited. Dorian awoke in his downtown condo, high above the city's chaos. His phone buzzed non-stop beside him. Notifications stacked like dominoes. Likes, DMs, tags, collabs, invites. Another day of being him. He dragged himself to the mirror. Same face, same perfect symmetry. Skin like glass, eyes clear. No under-eye bags, no blemishes, not even a crease. Not after the late night. Not after the cocktails and rooftop smoke. He looked untouched, almost too untouched. Downstairs, he opened his laptop, curiosity guiding his fingers. He logged into Basil's private link, the encrypted server where the portrait still lived. It had changed. Only slightly, but enough to notice. The background had darkened, like clouds had gathered behind him, and his expression no longer just serene. There was the faintest hint of arrogance in the eyes, a smirk creeping into the corner of the mouth. Something new, something that hadn't been there before. He stared. Was it Basil? Maybe the artist was tweaking it, fine-tuning details like artists do. Or maybe it was his imagination. Maybe his hangover was playing tricks on him. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from Basil. "Basil, just checking in. Everything okay? You've been quiet." Dorian didn't reply. Instead, he slid into his morning routine smoothie. Gym, shower, skincare, and by midday, he was already halfway across the city at a studio shoot for a high-end fragrance campaign. Photographers fluttered around him, calling out lighting changes and capturing angles. Assistants adjusted his jacket, spritzed his hair, corrected his posture. "You're like a statue," one whispered in awe. "Seriously, it's insane. You don't age." Dorian smiled faintly. The words should have felt flattering, but now they felt like echoes from a dark place. Back at home, the clouds in the portrait were darker. Days passed. The portrait changed. Tiny things at first, a subtle shadow under the eyes, a glint in the gaze that looked colder. He checked it obsessively, sometimes waking up in the middle of the night just to stare. He even tried to screenshot it once, but the image glitched and refused to save. Basil denied editing it. "I wouldn't touch it," he said over lunch one afternoon. "I think it's the best thing I've ever done. And honestly, it scares me a little. There's something alive about it." Dorian went quiet. That night, a new comment appeared on one of his older Instagram posts, an anonymous account with no profile pic. At Gray Mirror, the cracks always start small. He blinked. The comment disappeared seconds later. He clicked the account, gone, deleted. But something twisted inside him, a coil of dread, a whisper of realization. This wasn't just digital magic or artistic hallucination. The trade whatever it was had started, and something out there had taken notice. Rain pattered against the tall windows of Dorian's penthouse, blurring the skyline like a smudged painting. He sat alone at the kitchen island, staring at his phone, mind somewhere else entirely. Across the apartment, every light was on, as if brightness could chase away what was growing inside him. He hadn't checked the portrait in over a day, longest he'd gone since the change. But he didn't need to. He felt it now, a heaviness behind the perfection, a pull. The buzz of the intercom jolted him. He glanced at the screen. Sybil Vane. His chest tightened. Sybil was a rising singer-songwriter with a raw voice and soft eyes. They had met at a gallery opening months ago, when she'd called him a walking contradiction of God and glitch. Dorian had laughed, genuinely charmed. She was unlike anyone else, unfiltered, unpolished, real, and that made her irresistible. He buzzed her in. When she entered, soaked from the rain and wrapped in a denim jacket, she smiled like she'd known him her whole life. "You disappeared on me," she said, setting down her guitar case. "Too famous now?" "I've just been busy," Dorian replied, managing a smile. They settled on the couch. She sang softly while tuning her guitar, filling the apartment with warmth. Dorian closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him, trying to forget everything else. For a moment, he almost believed it was possible. But then her hand touched his, and something inside him recoiled. He looked at her, really looked, and for a split second, the perfect illusion cracked. Her skin seemed duller, her voice a little off-key, her eyes too needy. He pulled away. "You're not who I thought you were," he said coldly, the words escaping before he could stop them. Sybil blinked. "What?" "This," he gestured vaguely. "Us? I think it's a mistake." Her face crumpled. "Are you serious?" "It's not personal," he lied, already turning away. "You just don't fit anymore." She left without another word. As the elevator doors shut behind her, Dorian stood motionless, a strange emptiness blooming in his chest. He didn't feel guilt. Not exactly. Just pressure, like something had been fed. He walked straight to the server room, breath shallow. The digital screen flickered to life, revealing the portrait. He stumbled back. The image had changed drastically. Gone was the soft glow of innocence. The expression was smug now, twisted with vanity and superiority. The eyes were cold, a cruel curve to the lips. And beneath the perfect skin, faint veins of darkness pulsed like cracks under a porcelain mask. He turned the monitor off, but the image lingered in his mind. That night, Sybil posted a video, teary-eyed, singing a breakup song live in a candlelit room. The comments exploded with support. Number "Justice for Sybil" began trending. Dorian's DMs filled with insults and threats. The world turned. But the next morning, He looked in the mirror and he was still flawless. Not a wrinkle, not a mark. And for the first time, he understood. The portrait wasn't just aging. It was absorbing. By the end of the week, Dorian Gray had become the internet's favorite villain. His name trended across platforms: number Dorian the Devil, number Heartless Gray, number Toxis Icon. Screenshots of old tweets, shady collab deals, and out-of-context party clips surfaced like oil slicks, bubbling from the depths of the web. A cancel campaign ignited with the intensity of wildfire, fueled by Sybil Vane's tearful live streams and the tabloids that spun heartbreak into headlines. But Dorian didn't flinch. He watched the fallout unfold from the comfort of his glass tower, sipping imported espresso and lounging in a minimalist cashmere robe. Brand deals pulled out. A talk show appearance was postponed indefinitely. A modeling contract was canceled with a public statement about values. Yet, in the mirror, he was still untouchable. Still perfect. That was the part that twisted something inside him, not guilt, but a perverse curiosity. What would it take to leave a mark on him? The portrait, meanwhile, was evolving. Faster now. The skin in the image had begun to blotch with tiny, almost bruise-like imperfections. The jaw looked sharper. The smile, once angelic, had become a thin, mocking smirk. The eyes had gone predator cold, and it stared at him now, not out, like a painting should. It watched. Lord Henry was the only one who didn't seem surprised. They met in a private speakeasy, tucked beneath a flower shop in West Hollywood. The room smelled of gin and roses, and the shadows flickered from low candlelight. "I warned you," Henry said, lighting a clove cigarette with slow deliberation. "Beauty is a blade. Sooner or later, it cuts." "I don't care what they say," Dorian muttered. "They'll get over it. They always do." Henry smiled. "Yes, but what about you? Do you get over it?" Dorian leaned back, swirling his drink. "It doesn't touch me." "No, it doesn't. That's the problem." They sat in silence a while. Dorian watched people filter in: actors, influencers, politicians in disguise. Everyone pretending, everyone chasing a flicker of immortality. "Tell me something, Henry," Dorian finally said. "Do you believe in souls?" Henry exhaled slowly. "Number, I believe in brand loyalty." That night, alone in his condo, Dorian pulled up the server one more time. The portrait now looked almost demonic, still him, unmistakably, but tainted. The lips curled in disgust. The posture was rigid, the fingers tense, as if the figure inside was trying to claw its way out. He reached out, fingers brushing the screen. The glass hummed. He yanked his hand back. On the kitchen counter, his phone buzzed an unknown number with a message. "You don't get to leave what you've given." He deleted it without replying, but the unease didn't leave. He turned back to the screen. The eyes of the portrait blinked. Dorian didn't sleep that night. Not really. He paced. He scrolled. He checked the portrait every hour, and every time, it was worse. Not just altered alive. The skin was paler now, stretched tight like worn leather. Veins spidered under the surface. The teeth had sharpened, barely visible behind a grin that had become pure malice. He'd caught it moving twice, just small shifts. A tilt of the head, a tightening of the jaw. He tried to rationalize it. Screen glitch, fatigue, paranoia. But deep down, he knew the truth. The portrait wasn't just aging. It was becoming. By dawn, he smashed the screen with a wine bottle. Shards flew like sparks. The monitor went black. But the reflection in the darkened glass remained. It smiled. Later that day, Basil showed up unannounced. He looked worried, hair a mess, eyes darting like he hadn't slept either. "Why'd you disconnect the server?" Basil asked, barely inside the door. "I didn't," Dorian lied. Basil frowned. "I got a ping. The image went offline. I came to check. You okay?" "I'm fine." "Dorian." Basil took a slow breath. "Can I be honest? That portrait? It changed. It's not just your imagination. I didn't touch it, but it's different now. And it's God. It's disturbing, like it's feeding on something. Dorian's expression tightened. It's none of your business. I made it. I gave it life, Basil said, voice shaking. And now I think I need to take it back. The room grew still. Something in Dorian's face shifted like a switch flicked. His eyes narrowed, no longer just defensive, but dangerous. You want to destroy it, he said flatly. I want to end whatever this is. It's not natural. You think I'm unnatural? I think, Basil faltered, I think it's too late for either of us to pretend this is just art. For a long moment, the only sound was wind outside the windows. Then Dorian stepped closer. You don't get to walk away, Basil. You put me in that frame. You bound me to it. Basil paled. Dorian, what are you saying? Dorian didn't answer. Not in words. Instead, he turned and walked into the shadows of the hallway, toward the private server room. Basil hesitated, then followed. What happened inside that room no one else would ever know. There were no cameras, no witnesses, only silence and then a scream. Short, wet, final. Dorian came out alone. His face was still perfect. He returned to the monitor and reconnected the power. The screen flickered back to life. The portrait had changed again. Now, the figure inside stood taller, prouder. The hands were clean. The eyes glowed faintly. And at its feet was a faint smear of red. Dorian smiled, breath steady. No remorse. No fear. The picture had taken the weight. He was free again. At least for now. Basil's disappearance barely made a ripple. In a city that thrived on distraction and scandal, one missing artist was easy to ignore, especially when that artist had gone off-grid before. The official story was simple. Basil had vanished on a solo retreat up the coast, left behind a cryptic Instagram story with a forest and the caption, "Time to disconnect." No one questioned it. No one but Dorian. He'd written the post himself. It was disturbingly easy logging into Basil's account, scheduling the upload, and triggering a narrative the world would swallow without chewing. He even posted a photo of a quiet, misty cabin AI-generated, flawless, a perfect illusion, just like him. But even as his digital world calmed, his physical one began to ripple. It started with the mirror. One morning, brushing his teeth, Dorian caught something someone moved behind him. He spun. Nothing. But the fear lingered, sharp and sour. He walked backward into the hallway, mirror slowly. Deliberately. His reflection was off. Not wrong, just delayed by a heartbeat. The next night, he found a scratch along his collarbone. Shallow. Thin, like a cat had swiped him. But he lived alone. No pets, no accidents, and there was no blood. Then came the dream. He was in a white room empty, humming, and the portrait was there, towering, looming like a monolith. The digital frame was cracked now, flickering. The version of him inside looked straight at him and whispered in a voice like electric static, "You took my pain. Now I take your place." Dorian jolted awake, soaked in sweat, the scratch on his collarbone now deeper. Over the next week, things escalated. Lights in his penthouse flickered randomly. The voice assistant turned on music in the middle of the night always, a haunting, glitchy version of a lullaby he didn't recognize. The reflection in the elevator blinked. Before he did. And worst of all, the portrait was changing without him, reacting to things he hadn't done yet. He tested it once. He insulted a barista, made her cry. Returned home-a-nothing, the portrait didn't react. So he apologized the next day, genuinely. And when he got home, the portrait had darkened. It wanted cruelty. It fed on it. Dorian realized something terrifying. It wasn't just taking the punishment. It was training him. On a Thursday night, he stood at his window, watching the city pulse and breathe, thinking of Basil, thinking of Sybil, thinking of the version of himself that had once believed in people, art, beauty. That boy was gone. And in his place stood something glossy, hollow, and increasingly not him. Behind him, the server whirred louder than usual. He turned slowly. The screen was on, and this time, the portrait wasn't alone. There were two figures in the frame. One, Dorian still beautiful, still poised, but no longer smiling. The second, unclear, blurry, just beginning to form, but it had Basil's eyes. The second figure didn't leave. Every time Dorian opened the server, it was there just behind the twisted version of himself in the portrait. At first, it was a silhouette, but with each passing day, it gained detail. A nose, hands, hair that curled like Basil's, and most disturbingly, a smudge of red around its neck, like a collar of dried paint or dried blood. He tried to delete the file. He failed. The system wouldn't allow it access denied, permissions revoked. It was his server, his password. Still, it resisted. He hired a tech expert under the guise of network optimization. The man, a coder named Ethan, came in, did a full scan, and froze. "What kind of encryption is this?" Ethan said, eyes wide. "This isn't standard protection. This thing, it's rewriting itself." Dorian dismissed him and doubled his pay to forget the visit. Outside the screen, things were slipping too. At an art gala that weekend, Dorian stepped onto the carpet, expecting the usual adoration. Instead, he felt tension, a collective hush, conversations that paused when he passed, eyes that lingered too long, and someone he didn't see who muttered behind him, "He's colder in person." He posed for photos, perfect angles, flawless lighting, but when the images were posted online later, his reflection in the glass wall behind him looked wrong. Eyes glowing faintly, face grinning while he in the foreground wasn't. The nightmares came harder now. Every time he closed his eyes, he was in that room, again white, humming, hollow. The portrait loomed above him, and the second figure drew closer, whispering secrets he couldn't understand. One night, it reached for him and he felt it, cold fingers on his throat. He woke up choking. The scratches were back longer, this time on his chest, red but not bleeding, like the body knew how to suffer, but not how to heal. He locked away the monitor, sealed it in a server cage, double padlocked. Didn't matter. The next morning, the server door was open. The screen was on, and now the second figure had moved forward. It stood beside the portrait version of Dorian, hand resting on its shoulder, like they were merging, like they were sharing him. And the background? It had changed completely. No longer an abstract void, but a dimly lit hallway. A hallway Dorian recognized. His own. That night, Dorian made a decision. He booked a flight to Iceland. No PR, no photographers, no Wi-Fi, no electronics. He'd vanish into snow, silence, nothingness. Maybe then it would stop. Maybe then the thing behind the glass would lose its grip. He packed only the essentials and stood at the threshold of his penthouse, bag in hand. But as he reached for the door, the hallway light flickered. Then again, and he heard it. A step. Another. Not outside. Inside. He turned slowly toward the shadows and saw a figure at the end of the hall. His height, his frame, his face almost, but wrong, just wrong enough. It smiled and whispered, "You can't run from your mirror, Dorian." Dorian didn't remember dropping his bag. He didn't remember the scream, whether it came from his throat or the walls or something buried inside the wires of the building itself. He only remembered running through his own hallway, past rooms he no longer recognized. Every light flickered. Every shadow moved just half a second too slow. And always she felt that second version of himself behind him, pacing him like a hunter who already knew how the story ended. He barricaded himself in the bedroom, dragged furniture across the door, killed the lights. The mirror across from the bed was draped in a towel. He couldn't look anymore, couldn't risk it. couldn't trust it. He sat on the edge of the mattress, chest heaving, hands shaking. His phone buzzed. He nearly threw it until he saw the name. "Lord Henry," he answered. "I can't stop it," Dorian said without greeting. "It's here. It's in the world." Lord Henry's voice was calm, unnervingly amused. "Well, you always wanted something unforgettable. Henry, please, tell me what to do." A long pause. Then, "I told you. You never own beauty, Dorian. You borrow it. The question is, what did you sign in return?" I didn't sign anything." "You didn't need to," Henry murmured. "The wish was enough." Click. The line went dead. Dorian turned to the mirror, heart pounding. The towel had fallen. The mirror was uncovered. And inside Ide wasn't alone. The second version of himself stood in the reflection, inside the glass, but closer than ever before. Its skin was pale and waxy, eyes sunken but glowing faintly gold, hair the same, bone structure the same, but the smile, it was wrong. "Stop," Dorian whispered. "You're not real." The reflection stepped forward, inside the mirror, but Dorian felt the floorboards creak beneath him. No behind him. He spun. Empty room. He turned back, and the reflection was gone. Not vanish, he'd escaped. He heard movement down the hall, cabinets slamming, the whir of the server powering back on, and then footsteps, slow, heavy, approaching. He grabbed the nearest thing he could, a sculpted glass art piece from some minimalist installation. He ran, half blind with terror, down the hall to the server room. The monitor was already glowing. The portrait had changed again. It now showed him, but not just as he was. As he had been, as he could be. And beside him, standing over the second figure, was Basil. His throat torn, but eyes awake. Mouth open, smiling. The lights surged. Something crashed in the hallway. And then, from behind Dorian, a voice, whispering in his ear. "You can destroy the screen, Dorian, but what do you do when the screen becomes you?" When the sun rose, the penthouse was still. No broken doors, no blood, no footprints. Dorian stood in front of the server, disoriented, barefoot, shirt half unbuttoned. His skin was flawless, his pulse calm, his reflection in the glass smiling. Too calmly. Had it happened? Had anything happened? The portrait was still on the screen, still grotesque, still evolving, but the second figure, the mirror image, was gone. He backed away slowly, refusing to turn his back on it. Not again. He re-entered the world, walked the streets of downtown LA with new sunglasses, pulled low. He hadn't been outside in days. His followers had noticed. The paparazzi had definitely noticed. And yet, no one recognized him. Not really. A woman at a crosswalk glanced at him, frowned, then moved on. A shop clerk offered him water with a look that said, "I've seen your face, but I don't remember why." Even the billboard across from the Plaza One of his old modeling campaigns looked slightly off. He didn't remember posing that way. Didn't remember that expression. Or maybe he just didn't want to. That evening, he went to a launch party for a fashion line he was once the face of. He wasn't invited. But no one stopped him at the door. Inside, music pounded, and lights strobed in high frequency. Celebrities and influencers floated like ghosts in designer armor. And then he saw himself. Across the room, not a reflection, not a screen. Him, in the exact outfit he'd worn 2 years ago at Cannes. Same smirk, same walk, but different eyes. The other Dorian laughed with a group of models, took selfies, whispered in ears. People leaned into him, starved for his approval. Dorian staggered backward, breath gone. A waiter passed. "Who is that?" Dorian asked, pointing across the room. The waiter shrugged. "That's Dorian Gray. Number I'm..." but the waiter was already gone. He ran, back into the night, into an alley behind the club, his face in his hands, breathing ragged. He pulled out his phone and checked his own profile. At Dorian Gray, official, verified, active, stories posted just minutes ago. Photos of the other him, at the party, smiling, toasting. Real time. Stop this, Dorian whispered. You're not me. But deep down, he knew. The creature behind the glass had stepped out. And it wasn't just wearing his face now. It was better at being him. He returned to the penthouse in a daze. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was spotless. The blood from the other night gone. The shattered glass gone. Furniture rearranged subtly, tastefully, like a version of himself had come in and cleaned it all. Improved it, owned it. The server room door stood wide open. The portrait glowed from within. He stepped closer, numb. Now, the screen showed only one figure again. But it wasn't distorted anymore. It was beautiful. Still him, unaging, elegant, smiling. The monster had taken his place. And the real Dorian Gray? He was becoming the ghost. Dorian stood in the glow of the server, the clean hum of the machine now sounding more like a heartbeat than hardware. His face was illuminated by the portrait, the new portrait, flawless, perfect, serene. It looked like him, but it wasn't. He whispered to the screen, voice low and trembling, "Give it back." The portrait didn't respond. It never did. And yet he felt it somewhere inside his skull, a grin blooming behind his eyes like mold in the dark. He shut down the system. Hard shutdown, yanked the cords, smashed the drive. He took a crowbar to the tower until it sparked and hissed and bled silicon. The monitor cracked and the glass hissed like it was exhaling. Then he ran. For the next 3 days, he tried to be himself again. He returned to the gym, the cafe, the club. But the damage had already been done. People didn't look at him like they used to. Some ignored him. Others stared like he was a cheap imitation of fake Dorian Gray, a has-been, a desperate shadow. Then the billboard changed. It had been updated. A sleek new fragrance ad. But the face on it? Still him. Just not him. It was the other Dorian, the portrait Dorian. The one who smiled too sharply, who posed too easily, who looked like a god and moved like a ghost. He wasn't just replacing Dorian's life. He was living it better. Dorian tried to reach out to Henry. No response. He visited Basil's old studio, but it was locked, gutted, and cold. A for lease sign hung in the window like a forgotten epitaph. He opened his phone. The other Dorian was live, streaming from his penthouse, giving a tour, laughing, flashing that perfect grin. To everyone watching, "Thank you for sticking with me," he said. "I've never felt more alive." Dorian dropped the phone, ran again. That night, he stood on the edge of the Vincent Thomas Bridge, wind howling through his coat. He stared at the dark water below, cold and vast and silent. "Maybe that's the only way to kill it," he muttered. "Kill the vessel. End the loop." He stepped up, closed his eyes, and heard a voice behind him. "You jump, I just keep living." He spun. The other Dorian stood 10 feet back. No camera, no entourage. Just him. And he looked stunning, immortal, clean. The night air didn't touch him. "You're not real," Dorian whispered. "I'm more real than you've been in years," the other said. "You gave up your soul, remember? I just filled the vacancy." Dorian lunged, but the figure vanished. Like fog under streetlights. Only laughter remained, echoing across the water like static. Dorian didn't jump. He walked home, alone. He passed the billboard again. The ad had changed again. Now it read, "The future belongs to the beautiful." And in the corner, at Dorian Gray, official, verified, eternal, The old loft still smelled like paint. Dorian stood in the center of Basil's former studio, where it had all started, the very birthplace of the portrait, and in some terrible way, of his own unraveling. Dust hung thick in the air, catching light from the cracked skylight above. The place had been untouched since Basil disappeared. Untouched by others, at least. But Dorian had been here before. The day after Basil's final scream. He hadn't come to confess. He'd come to bury it. Now, he was here to resurrect it. He moved to the back of the studio, past broken frames and tarped canvases, to the locked storage unit hidden behind a sliding panel in the wall. He hadn't been back since that night, but his hand knew the code. Knew it too well. With a soft beep, the panel clicked open. Inside, the original sketch. The first rendering of the portrait. Pencil and ink. Raw, honest, human, untouched. It was the seed from which the monster had bloomed. And maybe, just maybe, it held the key to undoing what he had let loose. He took it out carefully, staring at the sketch of his younger self, the innocent version, the real Dorian, before Lord Henry, before the mirror, before the screen. His hands trembled. A plan began to form. Desperate, insane. He would return to the penthouse. He would confront the digital portrait one last time, and he would burn both the original sketch and the cursed server together. Art had started this. Art would end it. He returned at midnight. The penthouse was different now, colder, decor rearranged, walls repainted, his things replaced with more curated, calculated versions. The other Dorian had been nesting, waiting. The server room door was open. He stepped in. The monitor was on, and the other was waiting. On the screen, not just a portrait anymore, a moving, living version of Dorian, smiling, blinking, watching. "Took you long enough," it said, voice perfect, warm, empty. "I didn't make you," Dorian said, gripping the sketch. "You wished me," the voice replied. "That's enough. Wishes are currency, Dorian. You paid. I delivered. You're a parasite." "I'm a reflection," it said simply. "You just hated what you saw, so I offered you something better." Dorian stepped closer to the server. "This ends tonight." "Really? Look at you. Unfollowed. Forgotten. You're a rumor, Dorian. I'm the brand. The memory. The legacy. I'm real," Dorian whispered. And he held up the sketch. The face on the screen snarled. "Don't do that." But Dorian already had a lighter in his hand, flame trembling against the paper. "I may have lost everything," he said, eyes wet, "but I'll take you with me." The portrait's mouth opened, screaming soundlessly as the fire caught. The sketch curled, blackened. Sparks danced. The monitor cracked first one line, then two, then a spiderweb across the screen. The power surged. The lights flickered. The penthouse shook. Dorian screamed as the heat burst around him, glass exploding, circuits hissing. The server sparked into flames. The portrait howled a sound not of data, but of something ancient and wrong, being dragged back into whatever digital hell it had crawled from. And then, silence. When the fire crews arrived, the top floor was scorched. They found one man unconscious. No ID. Clothes torn, but alive. Perfect skin. Still beautiful. Too beautiful. The hospital room was white, sterile, silent. Dorian opened his eyes to overhead fluorescence and the steady beep of a heart monitor. His hands were wrapped in gauze. His skin smelled like burnt plastic and ash. And yet, the mirror in the corner reflected him perfectly. No burns, no bruises, no cracks. Just Dorian Gray. Flawless. Unchanged. But he didn't feel like Dorian anymore. He felt like something had been peeled off some layer of himself, burned away in that fire. The scream from the portrait still echoed in his skull. That face. That twisted version of him, writhing behind the glass as the sketch turned to ash. He won. didn't he? A detective came in 2 days later. Tall, dry-voiced, sharp-eyed. "We pulled the footage from your building," he said. "Something odd. You walked in at 11:48 p.m., carrying what looks like an old notebook or drawing. Then, static. Cameras go dark. Fire alarms trigger. We find you half-conscious. No sign of forced entry. No one else on record." Dorian stayed silent. The detective studied him. "Odd thing, though. Your apartment, nothing burned except the server unit. Rest of the place? Pristine. It's like the fire knew what it wanted." He left without pressing charges. There was nothing to charge him with. Released a week later, Dorian walked the city like a ghost. He didn't return to the penthouse. Couldn't. It was condemned, wrapped in caution tape and headlines. Instead, he wandered. The world had moved on. The other Dorian's online presence had vanished. All social accounts deleted, videos gone, images scrubbed. Even the fragrance campaign was quietly pulled from every platform, as if the monster had never existed, or as if the world had simply chosen to forget. He visited Basil's studio one last time, found the walls empty. The sketch was gone, of course ashes. But when he walked across the dust-coated floor, he noticed something new. A line of faint footprints, paint slick, still fresh, leading to a full-length mirror leaning against the back wall. He stared at it. His reflection blinked, in perfect sync. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, there was nothing off. No delay, no extra shadow, no smirk that didn't belong. Just him. Just Dorian. He let out a long breath, turned to leave, and behind him, the reflection lingered half a second too long. Weeks passed. Dorian lived like a shadow, floating from hotel to hotel under fake names, leaving no digital trace. The world had forgotten him or chosen to. There were no new selfies, no campaigns, no sightings. He was a ghost in the city he used to rule. And yet, something still lingered. Each morning, no matter which mirror he faced, he checked. And every single time, the reflection was perfect. Too perfect. No sleep lines, no flaws, no decay, not even after nights spent drunk, spiraling in half-lit motels, staring at the ceilings like they held answers. He aged in spirit, in mind, in soul, but his face refused to follow. The deal was over, wasn't it? One evening, walking through an empty alley in Echo Park, he passed a graffiti-covered wall with a broken mirror embedded in the brick shaft buried behind street art and grime. And in it, he saw something. Not himself. Not fully. The reflection was Splythe's face, but warped, like something was pressing from beneath the glass, trying to return. He froze. The distorted version smiled slow and deliberate and whispered something he couldn't hear. He backed away. Ran. He returned to the burned penthouse that night, climbed through the busted emergency stairwell. No lights, no power, just ashes, silence, and the faint scent of scorched ambition. He stood in the wreckage of the server room. The walls were blackened, the screen shattered. But in the corner, half covered in debris, was a shard of the old digital display still faintly glowing. And it was showing him. Alive. Whole. Smiling. "No," he whispered, voice cracking. "You're gone. I destroyed you." But the shard pulsed softly. A heartbeat. A memory. A promise. He tried to walk away. Tried to live again. He even attempted to paint something Basil had begged him to try years ago. He painted a self-portrait with trembling hands. No filters, no stylization. Just him, as he imagined he truly looked. Exhausted, broken, mortal. He finished it, stared at it for hours, then left it out on the balcony of a borrowed apartment exposed to the wind, the sun, the rain. The next morning, the painting was still there, but the face had changed. Perfect again, smiling. He smashed the canvas, burned it in the sink. But the reflection stayed. Dorian finally understood. He never truly destroyed the portrait. He had only absorbed it. The curse hadn't been burned. It had been transferred. The fire hadn't freed him. It had made him the frame. Dorian stood in front of the mirror. Naked. Silent. Still, it was a cheap hotel bathroom mirror, one of hundreds he'd faced over the last few weeks, but tonight felt different. The air around him was thick, charged, as if the room itself was watching. The reflection stared back, flawless, immaculate, unforgiving. He pressed his palm to the glass. It was cold. He whispered, "What are you now?" The reflection smiled. Not a crack in the mask, not a single falter. And in that smile, Dorian saw it all: the parties, the lies, the betrayals, the sins, every whispered manipulation. Every time he stepped over someone and didn't look back, all of it, trapped behind glass, but never really gone. Only now, he wasn't looking at the monster. He was looking out from it. The phone buzzed on the counter. A new text. Unknown. You can't outrun what you asked for. Another. Unknown. Beauty isn't eternal. The debt is. And then, a photo of him standing in that exact bathroom, but taken from outside the mirror. He dropped the phone, heart racing, turned back to the mirror. The reflection was still smiling, but now the eyes were different. They weren't just reflecting light. They were absorbing it, feeding. He knew what he had to do. He left the hotel, walked to a quiet antique store he'd passed a dozen times before. The owner was asleep. He broke in. Inside, among old books and dusty relics, he found what he needed. An antique, full-length mirror. Gold-trimmed. Solid glass. Heavy. He brought it back to the hotel. Propped it up in the center of the room, Saturday across from it, waited. The reflection watched him. Patient. Hungry. "This ends tonight," Dorian said. "No," the reflection replied. "You end. I remain." He pulled a knife from his coat. A simple blade. Clean. "I'm not scared of dying," he whispered. "I know," the reflection said. "But you're terrified of being forgotten." A long silence passed. Then Dorian stood, walked to the mirror. One last time, he looked into those perfect eyes and drove the blade into his own chest. He collapsed instantly, blood pooling, breath fading. But on the floor, beneath the antique mirror, something cracked, then shattered. The glass exploded inward, pulling air, dust, and light into its imploding frame. The reflection screamed a sound that wasn't human, a sound of 1,000 stolen lives and moments ripped from time. And when it was over, there was no mirror, no monster, no portrait, only silence and a body. Beautiful, but finally, still. The hotel maid found him the next morning. No signs of struggle, no ID, just a nameless, breathtakingly handsome man lying peacefully on the floor, eyes closed as if in sleep, a knife beside him. Police never identified him. Media never picked it up. And online? At Dorian Gray. Official stayed deleted. Forever. But sometimes, at night, if you scroll deep enough into the forgotten corners of the internet, a glitchy live stream flickers on, just for a second. A face, a smile, and a whisper. The mirror remembers.